You see, I used to do this solo. I could fly solo, but now I've got a producer. I've forgotten how to do it. I've been doing it all wrong. Anyway, we are going out now successfully, and I ought to apologize to my wonderful guest, who is ex-fundie Stacie. Hello, Stacie. How the devil are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
Good. Yeah, I'm fine. Somewhat flustered.
That's okay.
I forgot how to do it, basically.
That's all right. Don't worry.
So you're in British Columbia. This is a part of the world where I've got one or two friends and contacts that I've made, and it's interesting in that, being part of Canada, the culture is fairly different from America.
It's very different.
Yes.
Very different.
Yeah, I wasn't going to go so far as very, but yeah, I can believe it. I can believe it because my Canadian friends, well, one thing I've realized they don't like is being mistaken for Americans. And of course, over here in Europe, our uneducated ears can mistake your voices for being American, and Canadians tend to find that a bit offensive.
Fair enough. But yeah, the culture is, I mean, even though we are not far from them, like we share a border, you can definitely tell the difference when you go to the States. And we live very close to the American border. So
do you? Oh, right.
Yeah. And so going down to the States just for getting gas or just going down shopping like for an hour or two is not like, I grew up doing that. So, but as soon as you go across, you're like, oh yeah, we're not in Canada.
Yes.
It's very different, but I mean, it's nice, but I love being Canadian. So
yeah. That end of Canada is more British than around Montreal and Quebec, which is quite French.
Yeah. Especially
it sounds as though you're not very far away from my Pastafarian friend. Dread Pirate. You may run into him because he comes on my shows quite a lot. I do Global Atheist News has just gone out, but tomorrow I do Global Atheist News Review, and I have a panel of people, including Dread Pirate, to express their views on the news, and it's rather fun.
Oh, I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, it goes out. Well, he actually live streams it, but so it goes out at about an hour and a half before this time.
Okay.
But tomorrow.
Right. Okay. So 11 for me.
But I tend to record it so that we can play with it, chop out anything that needs to be chopped out and put a front and a back on it, to make it look a bit more professional.
Okay. Nice.
Anyway, if you watch it tomorrow, an hour and a half earlier than now, you'll see Dread taking part in Global Atheist News Review. Excuse me. Anyway, this is not supposed to be about me and my silly channel.
That's okay. It's nice to find new channels.
This is supposed to be about you and your interesting journey, because you style yourself ex-fundie. So at one stage, you were at the fundamental end of the religious spectrum.
Yes.
And in your case, it's Christianity, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
But being ex means that you've gone all the way through the spectrum and popped out at the side, at the bottom. I don't know where you popped out, but you've
done a 180.
Yes. Yeah, you're now completely. You've gone through moderate and all the other stages, and you're completely in. Would you call yourself an atheist now?
I would, yeah.
Yeah.
I would.
Because a lot of us have difficulty with that word because of the way it's been colored. Particularly the American Christians have labeled atheists as some sort of near Hitler.
Yeah.
We've been called immoral, purposeless,
Yeah.
God-hating, and it's just nasty. So some people don't like to admit being atheists for that reason.
It was kind of hard to say the word for a while.
Yeah.
It was scary until I realized the meaning of it.
Yeah, those connotations are not friendly, are they?
No, and I did have my own like perception of it that was obviously incorrect until I realized what it actually was, and then I thought, oh, well, it's actually not as bad as I thought it was. And
as it's painted, yes, it's a deliberate attempt to paint it as horrible
it's
because
absolutely horrendous. Yeah.
Yes, because that's one of their ways of trying to keep their tribe together.
Yeah.
By demonizing anybody who's not in it.
For sure. There's a lot of demonizing of people who are outside of religion or Christianity in general.
Yeah.
And keeping you afraid.
It's not new. Ever since religions began, they've adopted that tactic. So earlier on, somebody who wasn't a Jew was called a Gentile, Gentile. And somebody who wasn't a Muslim was called an infidel, infidel.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So it goes right back.
The us versus them.
Exactly. Yeah. That's right.
Yeah. So if you're not in our group, then you're scary, you're dangerous. And in the Christian world, it's kind of like you'll also be referred to, people in the world. Like you don't want to be associated with worldly people. And that's anyone who's not
terrible.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, okay, we have to be in the world, but not of the world. That's a common phrase. Yeah. So.
Well, that touches on the other thing that all religions try to do, which is keep you ignorant.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's kind of how I feel now, as I was very ignorant, thinking that I was, I mean, I knew like a bit of stuff, but I'm feeling quite ignorant now, realizing the stuff that I didn't know. And I feel kind of foolish now, but when you know better, you do better. And,
well, of course, we should all believe in lifelong learning. I mean, I'm a teacher. I'm a retired teacher now, but one of the things about being a teacher is you accept the process of education. You realize that it's good on both sides, learning and teaching.
Yeah. I'm absorbing as much as I can now, because I feel like I rejected so much of what I could have learned when I was younger, especially when it comes to science and even ancient civilizations. I remember in grade 7 learning about like Mesopotamia, and I thought they were just lying to me. So I did my work and I handed it in, but the whole time I did it, I was saying to myself, oh, I'll just tell them what they want to hear. I'll give them the proper answers. I'll just hand in my work. And I blocked out everything that I learned, and I don't remember any of it now other than the name Mesopotamia. And now I'm going back and trying to find as much as I can.
And you're finding out that quite a lot of the Bible was lifted out of the Mesopotamian myth.
Yes. And I also was told at some point, I don't even remember where or from who or why, but I was never allowed to read Greek mythology. And I don't know why. And now I'm learning how so much of the Bible is just based on mythology. And so I'm finding it so fascinating, and I want to learn so much. And I'm enjoying it.
Well, absolutely. Don't feel guilty or shamed, because you weren't. If I know anything, you weren't given the opportunity. In fact, you were positively discouraged from questioning and seeking true answers.
Yeah. And I felt like I was sinning, or I felt like I was betraying God if I did seek other information. I felt like I was doing something wrong. So I didn't, and it kind of just, I felt like my loyalty was to God and to my faith, and I was a good Christian by just following everything the Bible told me, and
obediently, compliantly, so they could control you.
yeah, exactly.
Yes,
So,
yes.
and I thought I was doing the right thing.
Well, tell us about this interesting journey from real fundamental Christian.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've gone down through some stages.
I have, yeah.
Staircase.
Yeah, so
A staircase away from heaven.
yeah, pretty much, actually. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah, so my growing up was in, I guess what you would call Pentecostal, non-denominational Christianity. So very much the charismatic faith. So, the hands waving in the air, the speaking in tongues, the being slain in the spirit. It was a very theatrical church experience. Basically, by that, it was, pardon?
They're not shy, are they, of using
No,
anything
they're not.
in the book?
Yeah. Yeah. And by doing all of that, it was evidence that the Holy Spirit was was working, and God had shown up. His presence was there. So it felt very tangible. It felt very just like God was working, and he was at every church service, and you kind of expected it. So
yeah,
every
I've heard speaking in tongues mockingly described as border Toyota should have bought a Honda.
Yes, that's very, very common. Yeah, should have bought a Honda. I think I bought a Kia, should have bought a Honda. Yeah. Yeah. So that was basically what I grew up in, and I spoke in tongues. And the funny thing is, I could do it now, and I don't believe in any of it anymore, but I could speak in tongues, and I'm not going to, because it's kind of embarrassing.
You don't have to.
No.
We're not going to put you on that spot.
Yeah. So yeah.
What age were you? What age were you when you stepped away from that particular?
From the
charismatic Pentecostal end.
Well, I'm 38 now, and
you didn't have to tell us that.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm 38 now, and I stepped away from that particular genre about 3 years ago. I realized the charismatic Christianity was not real. So I came to that realization through a documentary that exposed the charlatans of charismatic Christianity. It was a Christian documentary.
Yeah.
And that it was very eye-opening to me.
So this is interesting. So it was a Christian documentary in which they exposed some of their own brethren.
Yeah, but they wouldn't consider them.
That's not true, charismatic.
Right. Yeah, they would not consider them true Christians. So
yes, of course, we have an expression here which is not true Scotsman.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So
this was because he put water in his whiskey, of course.
Yeah. Yeah. So after watching that, I thought, okay, well, definitely Christianity is still real. I just have the wrong theology and the wrong doctrine and the wrong version. I need to find the right theology, because it never even occurred to me that maybe this is all wrong in general. Maybe this is all fake. right away, it didn't occur to me. And
Mm.
so that documentary had a very heavy Reformed influence. And
Hmm.
so from watching it, I started following a lot of the Reformed teachers that they had in it. And so um, the funny thing is, Reformed theology and Calvinism is
Mm.
probably the most true to the Bible.
Yes. Well,
Um,
the most fundamental end is, isn't it? I mean,
yeah,
they really believe it's literally the word of God, and they are
and
trying
that's
to obey it completely.
yes,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that's definitely like what I always believed. I never
Mm.
questioned the authority of the Bible
Mm.
um, at all. I never questioned it being the Word of God, and but so I just thought, well, I have to find whatever is the truest
Yes.
to like
The
what
version, the
the
closest version. Yes.
yeah.
I want to track back to that documentary that you
Mhm.
mentioned, because
Yeah.
and go even further back in our conversation, because
Sure.
what's come up is they really don't like people who aren't properly in their tribe, not true Christians.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of a conversation I had with my one-time father-in-law,
Okay.
who he was expressing outrage at some fake priest or pastor who
Mhm.
was milking his sheep, fleecing. You milk
Okay.
cows, fleecing his
Great.
sheep.
Yeah.
Of course, you can milk sheep, can't you? There's sheep
I
cheese as well. So,
yeah,
yeah,
there is.
yeah,
You're not wrong.
I'm mixing my metaphors here or
Yeah.
something. Anyway, he was complaining about these fake pastors, as he saw them, and
Mhm.
I said to him, "How do you tell a fake pastor from a real one?"
Right.
And he was a bit stumped.
Yeah.
There is no way.
Yeah. No, there really isn't because I mean, they really do. They both of them proclaim the same gospel. Like
Yeah.
as far as Jesus coming to earth, Jesus his mission was the same to die on the cross for our sins. Like it's all the same gospel, but with the charismatic, they kind of add on a few extra things. But according to Reform, then well, you shouldn't add on
No, that's
those
right.
extra things. And
It's
so,
strange how there's a sort of a fashion element here.
mhm,
It swings from being theatrical,
yeah,
lots of dressing up, smoke
mhm,
and
there
scent
is, yeah,
and all that sort of stuff, involvement,
yeah,
engagement, to being extremely austere and not liking any of that at all. Oh
no,
no, we don't do dancing.
no, it's very traditional and
Mm,
hymnals and organs and yeah.
mm,
So, so yeah, so after watching that that documentary,
mm,
um, I thought, okay, well, now we need to find a church that is a reformed church, and we have to get situated into that. And I expressed that to my husband, and he was okay with it because he always felt that the churches that we did go to, they didn't actually preach a lot from the Bible. Like they would kind of throw a few of the Bible verses up on the screen, and they didn't get heavy into the teaching. And so he wanted to know more about what the Bible taught, and he wanted to know more of the history of the Bible and not just like a topical sermon and kind of like a TED talk. And
yeah.
so he was okay with going to a more doctrinally heavy church. And
Mhm.
so we went to a Calvinist church in 2019. And it was definitely not what we were used to. It was like there was two services on the Sunday, and um, right away the pastor wanted us to join as members and take the membership course. And I was a little like, okay, well, we'd like to just come for a bit first and
Mhm.
kind of like get our feet in the door and see how we feel and stuff. And then in that fall, I feel like I kind of got hit with like an intense wave of, I don't think any of this is real. That was my first real, like, I don't think any of this is real, but I was pretty, my life was really wound up in Christianity. Our kids were in a Christian school, and we were going to the church. All my friends were Christian, and it didn't feel like, I just didn't feel like I could pursue any steps in, like, I guess, deconstructing. That felt really scary to me.
Well, you tell us a similar story to what I've heard many times, because they do try, once they've sort of got their claws into you, they do try and wrap their net around you completely. That's why when you first arrived, you were invited to become a member right away.
It was literally the first service.
Yes.
Yeah. And
but what I'm interested in is, were you doing this doubting independently? Were you doing it because you just described a community that you were in that was all heavily Christian?
Yeah.
And was it just you on your own who was thinking this isn't true, or was your husband alongside you discussing it with you, or
no? So the thing of my husband was, how do I describe? I was more of the strong, faithful Christian. He wanted to have a faith. He had a hard time always believing, but he wanted to believe. He has a very like science-based mind. He could never really fully accept the idea that there was a God, but he really liked the romantic idea of there being one. He liked the idea of maybe one day going to heaven, but his intellectual mind just couldn't wrap it around. Like, he loved the comfort of prayer and for our kids, and it was just like that's a really great, hopeful and comfort, right? Is that your
this is my daughter's
is that what she has?
Cuddly pig.
Yeah. So I was the one who was very no, we have to do this. It was important to me, and because it was important to me and he loved me, he was like, okay, sure, we'll go to church, we'll raise our kids in this. So he just kind of like went along, and when I said he was okay with going to this church because they preached more of the Bible, he wanted to know more about, like, how was the Bible put together? How did we get these 66 books? He had more of like, what is the history? Not like he wanted to know all the doctrines. He wanted to know the gaps, like where, like, Jesus was in the temple when he was a child, but then we don't hear about him again until he was 30. Like, where's all that missing section? Like, he had more of those types of questions.
That is the actual God of the gaps.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So he would sometimes
a 20-year gap.
It's a huge gap. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And so so he was okay with going because he's like, okay, well, they actually read a lot of scripture and there's a lot of teaching. But so I didn't actually tell him any of my doubts because I thought if I told him, he might. Well,
in a couple situation like that, it could be an unraveling of the relationship, revealing your loss of faith.
Yeah.
You never know. You can't lift off the top of his head and look inside and see whether he's at the same stage as you or not. Yeah. So it could be the start of a rift, the cleaving of the Red Sea between you.
Right. Or like, will he just be like, oh, okay, that's fine. And then like I wasn't sure, would he encourage me in the doubts, or would he encourage me in like sticking to my faith? I didn't know. And I was like, oh, I don't want to tell him, because what if he encourages me to just like to just explore new ideas? And I just didn't know. So I didn't say anything. I didn't want him to see.
I can tell you another story of somebody else in a similar situation. This
Mhm.
is an Australian friend of mine who I interviewed 2 or 3 years ago,
Right.
who was training to be a pastor. He got to the final exams, because they do 2 exams. They do a Bachelor of Ministry and Bachelor of Theology.
Okay.
And as he came up to that, and he'd met his wife in the church, and they were raising their children in the church. He was in the choir and doing a bit of preaching and everything, because he was at seminary, in Australia.
Right. Yeah.
And it came to just before the final exams, he thought, I better read the Bible.
Yeah.
Guess what?
Yeah.
Guess what? It turned him away from the whole thing. And then, of course, he had to go home and tell his wife, who he'd met in the church, they were raising their children in the church, and he was the sort of assistant pastor in the church.
Yeah.
Had to work out how to tell her, because she was supporting him through this journey.
Right.
He didn't know how engaged she was with Christianity. You can't look inside, can you?
No.
So they had they opened a bottle of wine.
That sounds like me and Brian. Yeah.
And during the course of consuming this bottle of wine, they revealed to each other that they both thought it was nonsense.
Oh my gosh.
How lucky was that?
Yeah, that sounds a lot like just when I eventually did tell Brian.
Yeah.
There was wine.
Yes. Oh, thank heavens for wine.
I know. There was wine. Yeah. Yeah. So, so I just kind of covered up those doubts. Like I kind of knew how to push them away and kind of feed my faith, as the church would say. Like, just basically, I would continue listening to sermons and I guess brainwashing myself, like just talking myself into it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I will believe. I must believe.
Yeah.
I will believe. Yes.
Yeah. And one thing I realized too is I would have these conversations in my head so much. Like, I believed in God, but at the same time I believed in the devil. Okay. And I believed in hell. And there were times where I actually believed more in the devil. Like, I believed more. And I thought, well, if I believe more in the devil, like, then I have to believe in God. And I was more afraid of going to hell. So I'm like, well, if I believe more in the devil, then there has to be a God. So I can't leave this. So that would be how it would kind of like turn me back and just be like, nope, you can't go, because there's a devil.
Yeah. Well, that's another of their tactics, of course, because what they do is they set up a false threat.
Yeah.
In order to offer you a false solution, salvation.
Yes.
So the whole thing, it's like the gangsters in Chicago used to do. It's a protection racket. If you don't do this, you're going to go to hell, and the way to do it is to keep paying us.
Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of how I would come back around and be like, no, there's a hell. So I'm in. Like, I'm not going to risk it. I'm just going to stay.
There's an interesting news item that came out today.
Okay.
It didn't make my Global Atheist News because I recorded that. I recorded at the end of the week, so it's always 6 days out of date, I'm afraid. That's the nature of the beast. Anyway,
Mhm.
this particular news item shows uh, a Russian Orthodox priest. I'm not sure whether it's Patriarch Kirill, the boss of the Russian Orthodox Church, but it's one of the top priests in the church, if not him.
Okay.
And he's standing alongside a huge missile on a carrier, on a an 8-wheeled truck,
Mhm.
huge, really big intercontinental ballistic missile, no doubt nuclear armed,
Mhm.
and he's blessing it.
Oh my gosh.
And that's not the punchline. The punchline is the missile is called Satan.
Oh my gosh. Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, you couldn't make it up, could you?
No, you couldn't. Oh my gosh. Wow. Yeah.
So Esther's telling us, this is Esther, the
Okay.
Afro-Humanist.
Okay.
That's the name of her channel, the Afro-Humanist.
Okay.
She's a lovely lady, lives in the Midlands here in the UK, England.
Okay. Mhm.
And she's saying, I know a gentleman in a similar situation. He is now agnostic, but because he met his wife in church, he's not sure how to tell her. Well, it's a problem, isn't it?
Yeah.
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 And Frank is one of my old friends in Kentucky.
Mhm.
He
Oh.
tells us that his apostasy, his leaving of his faith,
Mhm. Yeah.
was brought on by him reading the Bible. And he read it in the way that most Christians read any other book, of course, without,
Wow.
without being biased towards it when you start reading it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's yeah. I mean, I was biased when I read it,
Mm.
and my husband wasn't biased, and he would just be like, "What the heck? Like, what?"
Mm.
And I would be like, "You can't say that. You can't."
Mm.
Yeah.
So,
So
so
mhm,
we've got you down from
mhm.
from the most fundamental step that you started in. We've got you down now to a more moderate church. What happened next?
Um, well, I feel like this church actually was even more intense because um like we joined it, and I've never actually joined a church, and they take it very, very, very seriously. So we joined it January of 2021, and it was I looking back, I'm like, oh, I should have just gone with my gut and just stayed. We should have just stayed going as visitors, but there was
Yeah,
quite a bit of pressure of
yeah.
the pastor basically was like, well, it's kind of like dating when you're um, attending churches. Like you kind of got to make a commitment, otherwise you got to
Yes.
move along. And we were like, oh, but we like the people, we like coming, but wow,
We
that's
don't we
intense.
don't want to marry the church.
Yeah, but they treat it as like a marriage ceremony, like
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
like a covenant to them, and
Yeah.
we're like, okay, and so we joined,
Mm.
and so we but then so we joined in January of last year, and then in August of last year we ended up moving 4 hours away, so 4 or 5 hours away, and it was when we moved away, and we moved to a new town, like a small town, and
Mm.
we didn't join a church right away, even though we were feeling like the pastor was checking in on us and like, have you joined a church? Have you found a church? And it's like, no, we haven't. We're trying, but we
How
haven't.
how how did that happen? Did they come knocking on your door or
No,
something?
he just called and like, have you found a church? Have you found a church? And we had
So
tried a few, but
new person in town, new telephone number, and he cold called you.
no, the pastor from the church that we had. So
Ah,
yeah,
right.
he
So
because he
you, your
wanted.
your contacts were handed on.
Yeah, yeah. And so, uh, but we weren't like, at this point, I was kind of like liking the fact that we weren't being expected to be at church every week. And I was feeling kind of like just a little bit of like clarity for
Mhm.
like moving
Mhm.
away, and
Mhm.
our kids weren't in the Christian school anymore, and we didn't know anybody here, and it was
Mhm.
kind of like it was weird. It was like I was able to kind of think,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I started exploring different podcasts, even more
Mhm.
liberal podcasts, which
Mhm.
felt very off limits before.
Oh, naughty girl.
Yeah. um, I've always kind of had like fascinations with different religions and different cults, and um yeah, so I started listening just to more of those types of podcasts and kind of seeing like just the connections in just religion and cults and just all kinds of different things. And it kind of got me, your algorithm starts to change on YouTube, and different videos were popping up. And I would even just start seeing things on creationism and evolution. And
Yes, yes, yes.
um, I was a born and bred creationist, and
Ooh. Is that old Earth or young Earth?
oh, a young earth. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
even though here's the thing, even though, like, I believed in dinosaurs and I
yes.
I don't know, I couldn't explain that, like
Well, they get round it by saying that a day back then was actually several million years.
yeah, exactly. So it was always like, I believe in dinosaurs. My husband and I went to New York, we went to, like, the Museum of Natural History, and I saw them, and I was like,
Yeah,
"This is
yeah,
amazing." So it's like I
yeah.
was like, "I don't know, I can't explain it, I don't know."
Mm.
So I didn't
And
deny it.
you know who the director of that is, don't you?
No.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh, okay. Okay,
Mm.
that's cool. I've seen him on YouTube, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm right. It's either the New York Museum of Natural History or the New York uh, Museum of Astronomy,
Oh, okay.
or I'm not sure, but he's
Okay.
there.
Okay,
Mm.
that's cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, so, like, there's just a lot of mental gymnastics that you
yeah.
have to do, and just
Mm.
things that I would be like, "Oh, it's just easier not to think about it. It's easier not to try to come up with answers." I'm like, "I don't know," but yeah. So anyways, I just started realizing, like, this just sounds so weird. Like, I would think that, but I just like, throughout my life, there were things that I just thought, "This just sounds weird." And if I were to tell it to someone who doesn't believe in it, it just sounds like the strangest thing, like, things like the rapture, and it's
Yes.
just bizarre, and it would make me uncomfortable inside,
Mm.
even just even with my husband in earshot hearing some of it, I'd be like, "What is he thinking? Like, does he think this is bizarre?" And
Yes. Mm.
he's so sweet, like, he would just be like, "Mhm, mhm." But inside I'm thinking, "Oh my gosh, he must think this is the strangest stuff he's ever heard," right? But he's just such a kind, sweet man. Anyways, so it would make it would just make me uncomfortable, but I believed it, but I
Mhm.
didn't. I don't know, it's hard to kind of, put into words. I guess cognitive dissonance is
Mhm.
the
Yeah.
best way to
Yeah.
describe how I was feeling a lot of the time, and,
Yeah.
um, now that I know what that is, I'm like, "Yeah,
Mm.
that's exactly what I what I was going
Yeah,
through
yeah.
the
Mm.
last few years," and
Trying to
yeah.
keep contradictory thoughts in
Yeah.
one brain simultaneously.
Yes,
Yes.
exactly. Um, so when we moved, um, that's it was in the fall again, I started feeling the
Mm.
doubting come up, and I was like,
So,
"Okay."
so you've now been from Pentecostalism down
Uh-huh.
to a more
Calvinist.
austere, slightly more austere, but still fairly up the fundamental scale.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, I was still very much, like,
Yeah.
into it. It was like yeah, well, the thing is when I stopped believing in, like, the charismatic stuff,
Mm.
that's when I felt like my world really really changed, and I felt like the rug had been pulled out from under me. And I promised myself then that I would never not allow myself to ask questions and to find the answers. So that was a very earth-shattering time in my life, because I felt like my whole life I had been lied to about charismatic stuff, and just like speaking in tongues and thinking that was real. And
Mm.
that felt very, very just, I felt lied to. I felt duped. I felt
Yeah.
stupid.
Yeah.
So when I went to try to find a more correct theology and going to Calvinism,
Mm.
I just was like, I'm going to just always let myself ask questions, and I'm not going to like hold back. And so what I'm trying to say is, when I made the jump just in the last, well, I guess it's been about 6 months now, 6 or 8 months, realizing this is all fake, because I started feeling those doubts creep up again, and I was like, "Okay, I made myself that promise. I'm not gonna not allow myself to find these answers, and I'm gonna explore these doubts that I have." Because the last time I found out that it was fake, and I was happy that I found out, even though it was very
Mhm.
hard. I was happy that I found out.
Yeah.
So this time, coming to the realization that, oh, all of this is just baloney. It wasn't as earth shattering, because I felt like he's like making that staircase
Yeah.
analogy. It was the next natural step, even though it does seem like a big one, but 3 years ago was a bigger, um,
Right. Yeah.
it was a bigger thing to me than this. This just felt like, well, of course, I've been trying to hold on to um, Christianity, and I've been just trying to make it work, and it hasn't really felt like it's
Mm.
been true, even though I've been just thinking I have to
Yes.
be a Christian.
Yes.
So this has been a very natural next step, and it feels like, okay, finally I've gotten all the answer. Well, I mean, there's still many answers, but I
Yes.
feel like I've gotten the answer to my life's biggest question, and I feel like I'm finally seeing the truth of what feels like the biggest lie in my life,
Right. Right.
right? And so, um, to me, it does, like, some people, it takes them a few years. I guess in a way, it has been a few years for me,
Mhm.
but like, I remember telling my husband, like, in December over a bottle of wine, I had been having all these thoughts, and I finally was like, "Brian, I need to tell you something. I've never said this before," but it had been bubbling up, and I had
Mm.
been processing this and just like reading a lot, and I finally just said to him, like, "I don't believe in God." And he was like, "Okay." And he's like, "I don't think you're wrong." But rather than being like, "Cool, that's great," he was like, "I don't think you're wrong, but take it slow. Like, don't." He didn't want me to make a rash decision. Like, he was
Okay. Mhm.
very encouraging. Like, he's just like, "This has been 38 years.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
make sure that you're okay with this." And he was very encouraging, and he also was very happy, because he kept saying, "Okay, no one's been influencing you. It's not like you've been hanging out with someone who has been like
No.
telling you like, oh, you need to think this way, or this is how I think." He's like, "You've been doing this on your own. Like, this is just your own critical thinking."
Yes.
And so he's like, "That makes me really happy. Like, you just haven't been influenced by someone that you
Yes.
just met." Like,
Yes.
and so that was encouraging to him.
You didn't have a devil on your shoulder.
No, exactly. And so, um, I I started finding like articles on like religious trauma syndrome, and I was reading them like by Marlene Winnell and her book Leaving the Fold, and I was reading them and I realized, oh my gosh, like I haven't even touched on the anxiety that I've had since I was a young child. And
Mhm.
reading these things, it was like all of this weight had fallen off my shoulders by realizing, okay, everything that I felt as far as anxiety was brought on by these religion.
By the way you were brought up. And
Yes,
a lot of people come to that realization,
yeah,
and they're angry, and they think that they were deceived
yeah,
and they wasted part of their life in that deception, and
yeah,
they feel that they're rightfully aggrieved.
yeah. So
Does that mean you
I,
feel?
I feel like there's times where I'm just like, what the heck? Like, I feel pretty ticked, but I also feel really happy to be done with it. Like, I woke
Mm,
up for the first few months, like, with butterflies in my stomach. Like, I'm not
mhm.
a Christian anymore. Like, I actually felt really happy, and I felt like I
Guilt
can
for being
now.
happy.
Yeah, no, yeah, like I was so happy, like, okay, now I can experience life and I can experience it on my terms. And I
You,
saw,
you can eat all the babies you like.
I know. Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's funny. Um, yeah, but I would just, I saw life in a different way, and I was like, this is the only life we get, and it is such a
Mm.
gift. And I mourned
So,
heaven for
so
like,
do you blame anyone? Do you blame? Do you feel that you were tricked
mm,
as a child, perhaps?
um, I feel like I feel like I kind of blame like just religion as a whole.
Right.
Um, and
Mm.
I don't think I blame like any specific person, because I
Yeah.
feel like the
They
people,
were deceived too, and what they were doing, they thought was for the
yeah,
best.
because when like my oldest is 10, and I thought for the last 10 years I was doing the best thing too, right? And
Mm,
so
mm. Yeah,
um I had him in like we had him in a Christian school, and we had
yeah,
him like, and we were reading him the Bible
yeah,
and praying with him. And like I thought I was doing the right thing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so
yeah.
I was just doing what I thought was the
It's
best thing.
it's a recurring tradition, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
The way you're brought up is the way you bring your children up.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. But it
So
was so
I
interesting.
wanted
Oh,
I
go ahead.
wanted to bring in now, because there was
Mhm.
somebody else close to you in your family who was going through the same process at a
Yeah.
similar time. Tell us about that.
Yes. So my sister-in-law, who a lot of people might know, is ex-Christian Erin. Um, yeah, she
Who-
hosts.
Who's been on my show?
She's been on your show. Yeah,
Yes,
she hosts the Truth Matters
yes,
show on
yes.
Fridays on YouTube, and so we are married to brothers.
Mhm.
So we are both brought up. Actually, listening to a bunch of her interviews, I can't believe how similar our upbringings are. Like,
Mm.
I've always known she was a Christian, and that's how we really connected. And our family spent a lot of time together. And we even went to the same church at one point
Mm.
together. And, but it's such a huge family. And like,
Mm.
we've moved away, and just, circumstances. We hadn't talked for a while. And, one day I'm listening to one of my favorite podcasts, which is
Yeah.
The Thinking Atheist with Seth
Yes.
Andrews. And my next one pops up, and he's interviewing my sister-in-law.
Yes.
And I'm like, what the heck?
Yes.
So I show my husband, I'm like, look who Seth Andrews is interviewing. It's Aaron. And
Yes,
he's like,
yes.
what? So I texted her and she was absolutely shocked. I was the last person she would have ever thought to hear from regarding this.
Mm,
And we've just, in the last few months, just reconnected in such an amazing way.
mhm,
And it's been incredible. And she told me when she started, it's funny because she pretty much deconverted in 2019, the
mhm,
same year that I started kind of my
mm,
process
mm,
coming out of charismatic in 2019, around the same time in
mm,
the summer.
mm.
Um, it's funny just how like the timeline sort of connects.
Yeah.
And but she told me that when she was going through what she was learning, she thought of me quite a bit and wishing
Mm,
she could have shared some of this with me.
mm, mm.
Um, and yeah, so it's neat how it has all worked out that we're now like we can talk about these things, and
Yeah.
it's just it's like brought us back together in such an amazing bond.
Mm.
And um yeah, it's really awesome. So yeah, totally not planned. If anyone would have told me that this is the kind of interview I would be doing and talking about this, I would not have believed you, because I was a lifer. I
Yeah.
was
Mm.
committed. I Nothing would have changed my mind. But once you start to see the
Yeah.
evidence and the facts, it's like you can't be that ignorant forever.
No.
And I don't want to be ignorant. If I'm wrong about something, I would rather know and say,
Yeah.
hey, I was wrong. I want
Mm.
to learn. And
Mm.
yeah.
Well, in a recent podcast that I think it was the Global Atheist News Review show last week,
Hmm.
and it came up that I think it was Esther brought this up, actually, the Afro-humanist herself, that
Hmm.
the Bible was very out of date. You know,
Okay.
it doesn't know about a lot of things that have been invented or discovered since 2,000 years ago. So,
Okay.
so what we need God. We need a new
Yeah.
edition.
We need a new edition. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, One thing I just wanted to add, like the last few weeks in our journey with with the church that we have been members of, um, they've made it really difficult with our departure of Christianity, and they have continued to like publicly shame us
Oh,
from their
oh,
pulpit.
mm,
And they do three announcements about us.
really?
They've done two, including a special announcement. Um, and there's
Wow.
expected to be one more, which will be the excommunication. It's on their live stream, so it's like kind of weird. I can tune in even though I don't live there.
Yeah.
Um, but it's at one point 2 weeks ago they even referred to us as evil,
Oh,
and no one reaches out, which I don't really care because
oh,
that's not going to change my mind. But they don't reach out, which is funny because according to their theology, like we're headed to hell.
yeah.
And
The Christian thing would be to help you
yeah,
rather than accuse you of, rather than shun you.
yeah,
It never seems, shunning doesn't seem very Christian to me. It never has. I mean,
no,
it's the opposite of what Jesus would have done,
yeah,
surely, isn't it?
yeah,
If you believe the New Testament and all his amazing, miraculous stuff.
yeah.
Hmm.
So it's supposed to bring us back to repentance, but I'm thinking, no, why? Like, it's pretty much doing the opposite.
Yeah.
And
Mm,
yeah, ugh, it makes me feel gross. And
mm,
even mentioning our children's names, and
mm. Yeah.
yeah, so
That that would
it's not quite over.
that would be hate speech. There are some countries where especially given the new general data protection regulation thing, where you're not supposed to reveal anyone's name or identity without their permission.
Yeah.
Shaming your children is really outrageous.
Yeah, especially on a live stream to YouTube, I feel like that crosses some kind of line. So I haven't publicly even said the name of our church or any of the people that go, but yeah, it's just
they've done the reverse.
Yeah.
So we've got one of our regular viewers here, Ortangelo. You may have heard of Ortangelo. He's a very interesting fellow who he thinks that he's got evidence for God.
So
and it's the world. Because the world exists, therefore God must have created it. And not only that, but it is the Christian God, not any other of the several thousand gods that have been recorded in history. But so he keeps coming on my show and asking this same question.
Is he a theist, I'm guessing?
He's very much a Christian theist.
Okay. Okay.
Yes. So he wants to know how you explain our existence without a creator. Well, I'm going to answer that for you, Stacie.
I'm thinking the burden of proof is on him, not me, right?
Exactly. Our answer, Ortangelo, is we don't explain it. We don't know. Nobody knows. It's only people like you who claim to know. Here's the truth. Watch this.
So we just don't know.
We just don't know. That's correct.
Yeah. I'm okay with not knowing.
Well, yeah, it's not wonderful not knowing. I'd rather know. But in the absence of any evidence, and given the difficulty of investigating the question, I've got to accept, if I'm honest, I've got to accept the unhappy truth that we don't know.
Yeah.
And if you wind the clock back 100 years, there was a lot more that we didn't know.
Exactly.
We've discovered a heck of a lot of stuff in the time since.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, believe it or not, Stacie, we've done an hour all but 1 minute.
Oh wow. This has been fun.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it too.
Yeah.
All my guests say that they've had a good time and that they would come back. So I hope you're in that. I hope you're in that list too.
I would, and I appreciate it.
Great. So I'm going to use the last 40 seconds to plug next week's show.
Okay.
Because I have a very interesting guy. He is professor of neuroscience in Cape Town University, South Africa. And he's going to come and talk to us about his work. Okay. So there's something to put in your diary for next week.
Yes. Sounds good.
We've got some more comments to see here. What's this last few comments? This is Frank. Not knowing is better than knowing not. Well, yes, better than being deceived. Absolutely.
Yeah. So
I don't want to run over too much because the show is called Free Thought Hour.
Yeah.
So I'm going to play our outro now. I've put your name in the text that goes up in the credits.
Okay.
So thank you very much, Stacie.
Thank you.
Truly wonderful. And thank you to our live guests, our live audience, I mean.
Yes.
And thank you to our future audience who will see this as a podcast. And we will be promoting it everywhere, swamping the internet.
Yes.
So here we go. Bye-bye.
Bye.